Marcus Johnson gasped as scalding coffee soaked through his expensive suit. The white flight attendant smirked. Accidents happen. Around him, first-class passengers stared, some whispering, others averting their eyes. His father's voice echoed. In his mind, no matter your achievements, they'll always see your skin first. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next as this successful black executive faces a nightmare at 30,000 feet that will change his life forever. Ready to witness how quickly privilege can become persecution? Let's continue. Marcus Johnson was no ordinary passenger on Flight 3576 from Atlanta to San Francisco that fateful Tuesday morning. At 26, the Harvard-educated son of Elijah Johnson, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies, had already carved out an impressive reputation in the tech world. Pinnacle stood as one of the few black-owned Fortune 500 companies, a testament to his father's perseverance and brilliance in an industry dominated by white executives. The young Johnson had graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in environmental engineering and business administration before becoming a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. His academic achievements alone would have been remarkable, but Marcus had gone further, securing multiple patents for sustainable energy technologies before his 25th birthday. His innovations in solar battery storage had caught the attention of major industry players, with whispers that his work could potentially revolutionize how renewable energy was captured and distributed. Beyond his professional accomplishments, Marcus dedicated substantial time to philanthropic endeavors, establishing coding camps in underserved communities across Atlanta. His mission to diversify the tech pipeline had already helped hundreds of young Black and Latino students secure internships at leading companies. The Johnson name carried weight not just for its business success, but for its commitment to lifting others as they climbed. This morning's flight carried enormous significance for Marcus. He was traveling to deliver the keynote presentation at Green Tech Summit, Silicon Valley's premier sustainable technology conference. The presentation represented 3 years of painstaking research and development, with potential investors and partners eager to hear how his latest innovation could make renewable energy storage 40% more efficient and 60% less expensive. In his hotel room the previous night, Marcus had meticulously prepared. He rehearsed his presentation until dawn broke over Atlanta's skyline, fine-tuning each slide, anticipating every possible question. His custom-made navy suit with subtle gold pinstripes, tailored by one of Atlanta's few black master tailors, hung perfectly on his athletic frame. The deep blue complemented his rich brown skin, projecting the confidence and authority essential when asking the tech world to invest hundreds of millions in your vision. Flight 3576 had been delayed twice already due to mechanical issues, ratcheting up the tension among passengers. The airline staff moved with clipped efficiency, their customer service smiles strained thin by complaints and demands. In first class, privileged passengers tapped impatiently on phones and laptops, each delay threatening carefully scheduled meetings and appointments. Marcus settled into seat 3A, placing his leather portfolio and laptop bag carefully in the overhead compartment. His father had always emphasized presentation. Excellence isn't optional for us, Elijah would say. It's mandatory. Marcus straightened his Italian silk tie and discreetly checked his reflection in the window. Perfect. Professional. Polished. When flight attendant Stephanie Winters first passed through the first-class cabin, Marcus noticed her warm greetings for the other passengers. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" she asked the elderly white gentleman across the aisle. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Champagne or orange juice?" to the blonde woman in 2C. When she reached Marcus, her smile tightened imperceptibly. "Seatbelt," she said with a curt nod before moving on. No offer of a pre-flight beverage, no acknowledgement of his first-class status. Just a reminder of a basic safety requirement, as if he might not understand. Marcus had experienced this subtle shift countless times throughout his life. The momentary pause when he entered exclusive spaces. The slight change in tone when he spoke in meetings. The surprise that flickered across faces when he introduced himself as Dr. Johnson. These microaggressions had become so familiar that he had developed an internal taxonomy for them. This one fell under the reminder, a clear signal that despite his ticket, suit, credentials, and achievements, he was still viewed as somehow less entitled to the space he occupied. Marcus took a slow breath and responded with a polite, "Thank you," accompanied by the practiced smile that had become his armor. His phone buzzed with a call from his father. Marcus answered, grateful for the familiar voice before takeoff. "All set for the big day?" Elijah asked, his deep voice carrying the weight of experience. "Yes, sir. Presentation's ready. Just waiting for this delayed flight to get moving. Remember what we talked about. That room will be 90% white men who've never had to question their place at the table. Some will be impressed by you. Others will feel threatened. I know, Dad. This isn't my first rodeo. No, but it's your biggest stage yet. These energy executives aren't used to taking direction from young black men. Stand your ground, but pick your battles. I didn't build Pinnacle by fighting every slight." Marcus glanced around the cabin, noting how Stephanie now cheerfully chatted with an older white couple about their vacation plans. "I understand. Excellence speaks volumes." "It speaks, son. But some people choose not to listen. Call me when you land." As Marcus ended the call, a white man in his 40s dropped into the seat beside him. Bradley Coleman, according to the platinum frequent flyer tag on his briefcase, carried himself with the unconscious entitlement of someone accustomed to deference. His tailored suit and monogrammed cuffs marked him as a member of the financial elite. "Bradley Coleman, Asher Capital," he introduced himself with a firm handshake. "Heading to San Fran for business or pleasure?" "Marcus Johnson, business, Green Tech Summit." Bradley's eyebrows raised slightly. "Johnson, any relation to Elijah Johnson of Pinnacle?" "He's my father," Marcus acknowledged, used to this recognition. "Impressive company. I've followed their stock performance. Remarkable growth trajectory for a company of its background." Marcus noted the slight pause. Its leadership and innovation speak for themselves. Bradley nodded, his expression suggesting mild surprise at Marcus's articulate response. When Stephanie returned to their row, her demeanor transformed. "Mr. Coleman, so wonderful to see you again. Flying with us often these days?" "Third time. This month, Stephanie. The Atlanta-San Francisco route is practically my second home." "Well, we're always delighted to have you. Can I bring you your usual scotch once we're airborne?" "Perfect, thank you." She turned to leave without acknowledging Marcus. He cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me, could I get some water before takeoff?" Stephanie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll be serving beverages after we reach cruising altitude." She moved away before Marcus could respond. Bradley didn't seem to notice the discrepancy in treatment, already absorbed in his financial reports. Marcus removed his presentation, notes from his bag, forcing himself to focus on the task ahead rather than the familiar sting of differential treatment. His father's voice played in his mind. "Choose your battles." This flight, this moment wasn't the hill to die on. The technology he'd developed could change lives, create jobs, and help address climate change. That mattered more than a flight attendant's bias. Still, as the plane finally began taxiing, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something about this flight felt different. The tension in the air seemed charged with more than just travel stress and delays. Little did he know that in a few hours this routine business trip would explode into a national conversation about race, privilege, and power at 30,000 feet. The Boeing 787 reached cruising altitude with a gentle chime, announcing passengers could now move about the cabin. Stephanie Winters began the first-class beverage service, moving methodically down the aisle with practiced efficiency. Marcus observed her interactions, noting how her entire demeanor shifted from passenger to passenger. For most travelers, she delivered drinks with a pleasant, "Here you are," or "Enjoy." When she reached Bradley Coleman, her professional courtesy blossomed into familiar warmth. "You're Macallan neat, just how you like it," she said, carefully placing a crystal tumbler on his tray table. "We have those chocolate truffles you enjoyed last time, too." "You spoil me, Stephanie," Bradley chuckled, accepting the scotch with a practiced swirl of the amber liquid. "Only the best for our diamond members," she replied with a wink before turning to Marcus. The transformation was immediate and jarring. Her smile vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped deficiency as she practically dropped a plastic cup of water on his tray. No ice, no napkin, no pleasantries. "Something to drink?" she asked, already shifting her attention back to Bradley. "Coffee, please. Black with 1 sugar," Marcus requested politely. Stephanie nodded curtly without making eye contact. "I'll bring that around later with the regular service." Bradley took a slow sip of his scotch, glancing at Marcus's water cup. "Quite a contrast from my royal treatment, eh? You must not fly this route often enough. Got to build up those status miles." He chuckled as if sharing an inside joke. Marcus managed a diplomatic smile. "I typically fly international routes for work. Different airlines." "Ah, that explains it. Loyalty has its privileges." Bradley leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Though between us, I'm surprised to see Pinnacle allowing first-class travel. Most companies are cutting back on executive perks these days, especially the more diverse organizations. They tend to be sensitive about optics." The implication hung in the air, that somehow a black-owned company should be particularly frugal, that Marcus's presence in first class was an extravagance rather than earned. It was the kind of comment that wasn't overtly racist, but carried unmistakable undertones that had followed Marcus throughout his career. "Pinnacle believes in investing in its people," Marcus replied evenly. "Arriving rested for a major presentation that could secure millions in funding seems like sound business strategy, not a perk." Bradley nodded with the patronizing air of someone humoring a naive perspective. "Fair enough. What's this presentation about anyway? Something tech-related, I assume?" Marcus considered how much to share. His father had always cautioned him about revealing too much to strangers, particularly potential competitors, but basic courtesy demanded some response. "Renewable energy storage solutions. My team has developed technology that could significantly reduce costs while improving efficiency." Bradley's expression sharpened with interest. Storage has always been the Achilles heel of renewable energy. Fascinating field. I represent several investors who've been watching that space carefully. Their conversation was interrupted by Stephanie returning to offer Bradley another scotch, which he accepted with a familiar joke about turbulence requiring liquid courage. Once again, she moved past Marcus without acknowledgement. As Marcus opened his laptop to review his presentation, he noticed a young black woman in economy class watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. Tiana Washington, according to the name tag on her laptop bag visible from the aisle, seemed to be taking mental notes of the treatment disparities. Their eyes met briefly in the unspoken recognition familiar to Black Americans witnessing everyday discrimination. The flight continued with Marcus attempting to concentrate on his work despite the increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. Every time Stephanie passed their row, she engaged Bradley in friendly conversation about his hometown of Charleston, their shared appreciation for Southern cooking, or mutual acquaintances from previous flights. "My cousin lives in Charleston too," she exclaimed during one exchange. "In one of those gorgeous historic homes on Battery Street. Though the neighborhood's changing, you know. Not quite the same charm these days with all the new people moving in." Bradley nodded knowingly. "That's happening everywhere. Property values are actually dropping in some areas as the demographics shift. It's a real concern for long-term investors." The coded language wasn't subtle. Marcus had heard variations of this conversation throughout his life. The thinly veiled references to black families moving into previously white neighborhoods. The implication that changing demographics automatically meant declining standards. He kept his eyes on his screen, fingers tightening almost imperceptibly on his keyboard. An hour into the flight, Marcus realized his repeated requests for coffee had gone unfulfilled while Bradley was on his third scotch. Other first-class passengers had received attentive service, their needs anticipated before they could ask. Only Marcus sat with his empty water cup, his polite requests somehow never quite making it onto Stephanie's priority list. The situation triggered memories from throughout his academic and professional career. The professor who consistently called on every student except him during discussions. The executive who addressed questions to his white junior colleague during Marcus's own presentation. the security guard who followed him through the Harvard bookstore while ignoring white students slipping books into their bags. His phone buzzed, with texts from his team in San Francisco. Conference room secured for final prep. ETA? Investors from Tokyo just confirmed attendance. They're specifically interested in your battery innovation. PR team needs your approval on press release quotes. Time sensitive. Marcus checked the flight tracker, still nearly 3 hours from landing. His carefully prepared schedule was growing increasingly tight as delays compounded. The presentation materials on his laptop represented years of research, hundreds of testing hours, and the future direction of an entire division at Pinnacle. He needed to arrive focused and prepared, not drained from navigating petty discrimination. Deciding that addressing the service issue directly might clear the air, Marcus pressed the call button. Several minutes passed before Stephanie appeared, her expression making clear that the summons was an imposition. "Yes?" she asked flatly. "I ordered coffee about an hour ago," Marcus said, keeping his tone professional and pleasant. "I have important work to complete before landing and could really use the caffeine." Something hardened in Stephanie's expression. "We're very busy with service today. I'll get to it when possible." "I understand you're busy," Marcus acknowledged. "But I've noticed everyone else in first class has received their requested beverages. Is there a particular reason mine has been overlooked repeatedly?" Bradley shifted uncomfortably beside him, suddenly very interested in his financial reports. "Are you suggesting I'm providing poor service?" Stephanie asked, her voice rising just enough to attract attention from nearby passengers. "Not at all," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm simply requesting the coffee I ordered an hour ago, which seems like a reasonable expectation in first class." "I'll bring your coffee," she said tightly, "though I don't appreciate the implication that I'm not doing my job properly." As she walked away, Bradley cleared his throat. "Bit sensitive today, aren't they? Probably understaffed. Good help is hard to find in any industry these days." Marcus nodded non-committally, recognizing the conversation trap. Any agreement would validate Bradley's perspective that service workers were the problem. Any disagreement would make Marcus the difficult, oversensitive passenger. It was a familiar, no-win scenario that minority professionals navigated daily. From several rows back, Tiana Washington continued watching the interaction with increasing concern, her own experiences clearly informing her understanding of what was unfolding in first class. The tension had been set, the stage prepared. What happened next would transform a routine flight into a moment that would challenge everyone aboard to examine their assumptions about race, privilege, and power in America's supposedly post-racial society. 20 minutes later, Stephanie approached Marcus's row with a coffee cup balanced on her serving tray. Her movements were stiff, her customer service smile nowhere in evidence as she stopped beside his seat. Bradley had just returned from the lavatory and was settling back into his seat, accidentally bumping Stephanie's elbow as he maneuvered past. "Careful there," Bradley chuckled. "Wouldn't want to spill on anyone important." The comment hung in the air for a millisecond before Stephanie's grip on the coffee cup faltered. The scalding liquid arced through the air in what seemed like slow motion to Marcus, splashing across his crisp white shirt, navy suit jacket, and directly onto his opened laptop displaying his presentation slides. "Ah!" Marcus couldn't suppress the sharp intake of breath as the hot coffee burned through multiple layers of fabric to his skin. The pain was immediate and intense. "Oh my goodness," Stephanie exclaimed, her tone performatively concerned, but her eyes lacking any genuine remorse. "What an unfortunate accident." Marcus jumped to his feet, instinctively trying to distance the hot fabric from his skin while simultaneously grabbing his laptop, coffee dripping from its keyboard. The screen flickered ominously before going black. "I need napkins, quickly," Marcus said through gritted teeth, fighting to maintain his composure despite the pain and growing horror at the potential damage to his presentation materials. Stephanie stood frozen, making no move to help. "These things happen," she said with a slight shrug. "I'm sure your suit will clean up fine." The casualness of her response sent a clear message that registered with Marcus immediately. This hadn't been an accident. The coffee hadn't simply spilled. It had been directed, guided by Bradley's comment and Stephanie's barely concealed contempt. My laptop, Marcus said urgently. I need to dry it immediately. And some ice for these burns. Stephanie made a show of offering him a single cocktail napkin. This is all I have at the moment. I'll check if we have anything else available. Around them, first-class passengers reacted with varying degrees of concern and discomfort. An elderly white woman across the aisle gasped audibly. A middle-aged Asian man quickly offered his own napkins. Others suddenly became intensely interested in their reading materials or the view outside their windows, unwilling to witness the unfolding scene. From economy class, Tiana Washington had stood up at the commotion, clearly seeing what had transpired. He needs medical attention, she called out. Those are serious burns. Please return to your seat, ma'am, Stephanie responded without looking at her. The seatbelt sign is on, and this situation is under control. Marcus carefully placed his laptop on his seat, desperately hoping the device might still be salvageable. 3 years of research, the complete presentation, proprietary algorithms, all potentially lost in an instant. He dabbed ineffectually at his soaked clothing, the expensive fabric of his suit already showing signs of staining. The burn on his chest and thigh throbbed painfully. I'd like to speak to the chief flight attendant, Marcus stated firmly, his voice level despite the chaos of emotions beneath the surface. Bradley shifted uncomfortably beside him. Bit of an overreaction, don't you think? Accidents happen. No need to make a federal case out of spilled coffee. Marcus turned slowly to face him. I believe you suggested she should be careful not to spill on anyone important just before this accident occurred. Interesting timing. Bradley's face flushed. Now wait just a minute. Are you implying something here? I'm not implying anything, Marcus replied evenly. I'm stating facts. I requested coffee an hour ago. It was repeatedly denied. When it finally arrived, you made a comment about not spilling on important people, and suddenly I'm covered in scalding coffee with a potentially ruined laptop containing critical business materials. Stephanie had already retreated to the galley, speaking in hushed but animated tones with another flight attendant while gesturing toward Marcus. Their furtive glances in his direction made it clear he was being cast as the problem. Marcus discreetly removed his phone from his pocket and began recording audio, placing it in his cup holder. His father had taught him long ago that documentation was often the only defense against situations where one person's word would be automatically valued over another's based solely on race. Have you ever experienced unfair treatment but hesitated to speak up? Comment number 1, if you believe Marcus should immediately report this incident to the airline, or number 2, if you think he should focus on saving his presentation first. If you're feeling the outrage building in this situation, hit that like button to show your support for standing up against discrimination. As the pain from his burns intensified, Marcus weighed his options carefully. The presentation represented millions in potential funding and years of work, but the deliberate humiliation unfolding before an entire cabin of witnesses struck at something even more valuable: his dignity and right to equal treatment. Several passengers had discreetly taken out their phones, some appearing to record the incident while others seemed to be texting descriptions to friends or social media. The public nature of the confrontation was quickly expanding beyond the confines of the aircraft. Sir, you need to change your shirt. Stephanie finally returned to inform him, offering no assistance, ice, or first aid for his burns. You're creating a disturbance. I'm creating a disturbance? Marcus asked incredulously. I'm sitting here with coffee burns while my property is damaged, and somehow I'm the problem? If you continue raising your voice, I'll need to involve the captain, Stephanie threatened, her voice carrying just enough to ensure other passengers heard. I haven't raised my voice once, Marcus stated calmly, aware that maintaining composure was critical in a situation where any display of justified anger would immediately be weaponized against him. I've requested medical assistance for burns and help with my damaged property. These are reasonable requests after your accident. The emphasis on your accident wasn't lost on Stephanie, whose professional mask slipped momentarily to reveal a flash of anger. Are you accusing me of deliberately spilling that coffee? Because that's a serious allegation. Before Marcus could respond, Tiana called out from her seat in economy. We all saw what happened. You didn't even try to help him afterward. Final warning to remain in your seat, another flight attendant called to Tiana. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us when someone is being treated unfairly, Tiana responded, though she reluctantly sat back down. The situation was escalating beyond Marcus's ability to contain it. What should have been a routine flight to an important business presentation had transformed into a public spectacle, with racial undertones that everyone could feel, but few would acknowledge openly. As the tension in the cabin grew palpable, the crucial question became not whether Marcus would receive fair treatment, but how much worse things might get before they reached San Francisco. The scalding coffee had done more than ruin his suit and potentially destroy his presentation. It had exposed the persistent reality that no amount of education, achievement, or first-class tickets could fully shield a black man from the everyday indignities of racial bias. Would the airline staff recognize their error and attempt to make things right? Or would they double down, transforming Marcus from victim to villain in a narrative all too familiar to black Americans navigating white-dominated spaces? The next 10 minutes would provide the answer and change the trajectory of Marcus's career in ways no one aboard Flight 3576 could possibly anticipate. What would you do if you witnessed this situation unfold? How far would you go to stand up for someone being treated unfairly? The most shocking developments in this story are still to come. Chief Flight Attendant Michael Reynolds made his way down the aisle toward Marcus, his bearing projecting authority and control. Tall, with graying temples and a military posture, Reynolds had the appearance of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. His face was set in professional concern, but his eyes had already cataloged Marcus as a problem to be managed rather than a customer to be assisted. "Sir, I understand there's been an incident," Reynolds began, positioning himself to tower over Marcus, who remained seated. "Let's resolve this quickly to avoid further disruption to our flight." Marcus noted the framing immediately, not addressing the spill, the burns, or the damaged laptop, but rather focusing on the disruption, as if Marcus himself were the primary issue. "Yes, there has been an incident," Marcus agreed calmly. "Your colleague spilled scalding coffee on me and my laptop. I've requested medical assistance for burns and help with my damaged property. So far, I've received neither." Reynolds glanced at the coffee stains spreading across Marcus's expensive suit and the darkened laptop screen, then looked to Stephanie, who had positioned herself slightly behind him. "These things happen during turbulence," Stephanie offered, though the flight had been remarkably smooth. I apologized and offered napkins. He became confrontational. "That's not accurate," Marcus stated firmly. "There was no turbulence. The spill occurred immediately after Mr. Coleman here made a comment about not spilling on anyone important. I have not raised my voice or been confrontational in any way." Reynolds's expression tightened. "Sir, I wasn't present for the incident, but our flight attendants are trained professionals. If Stephanie says it was an accident during service, I have no reason to doubt her account." Bradley Coleman shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding situation but unwilling to contradict the narrative being constructed. After a moment's hesitation, he cleared his throat. "Look, it was just a bit of turbulence. The young man is making too much of a simple accident. Perhaps he's nervous about whatever meeting he's heading to in San Francisco." The condescension in Bradley's voice, referring to the Harvard-educated executive as young man and suggesting anxiety rather than legitimate grievance, added another layer to the mounting indignities. "Mr. Coleman," Marcus addressed him directly, "you and I both know there was no turbulence. You made a comment, and seconds later, coffee was spilled on me. Those are the facts." From several rows back, Tiana tried again to intervene. "I saw the whole thing," she called. "It wasn't turbulence. It looked deliberate to me." Reynolds turned sharply. "Ma'am, this is the final warning to remain in your seat and not involve yourself in matters that don't concern you. A passenger being discriminated against concerns everyone on this flight," Tiana responded, though she remained seated. The word discriminated hung in the air like a live grenade. Reynolds's face flushed as he turned back to Marcus. "Sir, no one is being discriminated against here. This is a simple customer service matter that's being blown out of proportion." Marcus carefully opened his jacket to reveal the extensive coffee stains on his shirt and the reddened skin visible through the wet fabric. "Does this look like a simple matter to you? I have first-degree burns that need attention." Reynolds barely glanced at the evidence. "We can provide basic first aid, but I'm more concerned about the accusations being made against my crew." "I haven't accused anyone of anything except spilling coffee and failing to provide appropriate assistance afterward," Marcus pointed out. "Everything else is being inferred." Stephanie stepped forward, her voice taking on a wounded tone that Marcus recognized immediately as strategic. "I've been with this airline for 15 years with a perfect service record. I find it extremely upsetting to have my professionalism questioned this way." The tactical shift was transparent, positioning herself as the victim rather than addressing Marcus's legitimate complaints. It was a maneuver Marcus had witnessed countless times in professional settings when issues of bias were raised. "My professionalism has been questioned since I boarded this flight," Marcus responded. "I was ignored during service, denied coffee for over an hour while every other passenger received their requests, and now I'm being treated as if I'm creating a problem by asking for basic assistance after being burned." Reynolds' patience was visibly thinning. "Sir, I understand you're upset about your suit." "This isn't about my suit," Marcus interrupted, his calm finally showing cracks. "This is about being treated with basic human dignity and respect as a paying customer. The same respect you've shown every other passenger in first class." The cabin had grown completely silent, other passengers either watching intently or deliberately avoiding eye contact. The racial dynamics at play were impossible to ignore. A black man in a position of professional achievement being systematically diminished and dismissed by white authority figures. Marcus reached for his phone, intending to call his father for advice. The motion triggered an immediate reaction from Reynolds. "Sir, we're still in flight. Cell phone use for calls is prohibited." "I'm aware of FAA regulations," Marcus replied. "I'm texting my team about my delayed arrival and damaged presentation materials." It wasn't entirely true, but the half-truth was necessary under the circumstances. As Marcus typed a quick message to his father, "Racial incident on flight. Coffee spilled on me and laptop. Being treated as the problem. Advice?" Stephanie's voice carried clearly from where she now stood with another flight attendant. "Always playing the race card when they don't get their way," she muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. "As if everything is about that." The comment sent a ripple through the cabin. An older black businessman in the opposite aisle shook his head slowly. A white woman with a young daughter covered the child's ears. Bradley Coleman suddenly became intensely interested in the safety information card. Marcus felt a familiar cold sensation spread through his chest, the physical manifestation of having one's lived reality dismissed as imagination or manipulation. The accusation of playing the race card was the ultimate deflection, suggesting that identifying racial bias was itself a form of cheating, rather than naming an observable truth. Reynolds, realizing the situation was spiraling beyond simple customer service, attempted to regain control. "Sir, I think it would be best if you changed into something dry. Do you have alternate clothing in your carry-on?" "My concern at the moment is my laptop and the burns, not my clothing," Marcus responded. "That device contains proprietary business, information worth potentially millions of dollars, not to mention my entire presentation for today's conference." "We can provide an incident report for your company's insurance," Reynolds offered mechanically. "Insurance can't replace the time and data," Marcus explained, struggling to maintain his professional demeanor while being so fundamentally misunderstood. "I have a presentation in 4 hours that represents years of research." Reynolds sighed, with theatrical patience. "I understand you're upset, sir, but there's very little we can do about your computer while in flight. As for the burns, I can bring a first aid kit." "Thank you," Marcus said, grasping at this small concession. "That would be helpful." As Reynolds stepped away, Marcus noticed the whispered conversations between flight attendants, the occasional glances in his direction. Something was happening beyond the immediate incident management. He'd been in enough corporate situations to recognize when decisions were being made about him without his input. His phone buzzed with a response from his father. Document everything. Remain calm. Legal team on standby. Call the moment you land. The advice was sound, but Marcus wondered if he'd even make it to San Francisco at this point. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from uncomfortable to openly hostile. What had begun as a simple request for coffee had exploded into a racially charged confrontation that seemed to be accelerating beyond anyone's control. Reynolds returned not with a first aid kit, but with a stern expression and the captain's authority backing his next words. Sir, the captain has been informed of the situation and believes it would be best for everyone if we return to the gate in Atlanta. This matter can be addressed properly on the ground. The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. They were turning the plane around. He was being removed. His critical presentation, his company's reputation, his professional standing, all potentially sacrificed because he had dared to ask for equal treatment and accountability. You're removing me from this flight because your colleague spilled coffee on me? Marcus asked incredulously, careful to keep his voice measured despite the shock and anger coursing through him. We're returning to the gate because this situation has escalated to a point that's causing discomfort to other passengers, Reynolds stated flatly. Marcus looked around at the other first-class passengers. Most avoided eye contact. Bradley stared fixedly out the window. Only the Asian man who had offered his napkins earlier met Marcus's gaze with an apologetic expression. The only escalation has been your staff's refusal to acknowledge what actually happened and provide appropriate assistance, Marcus pointed out. I've remained calm and reasonable throughout this entire incident. Reynolds' expression hardened. Sir, the decision has been made. We'll be landing in approximately 20 minutes. I suggest you gather your belongings. As the chief flight attendant walked away, Marcus sat in stunned silence, the reality of what was happening washing over him. In the space of less than an hour, he had gone from respected business executive on his way to a career-defining presentation to a problem passenger being removed from a flight, all because he had asked to be treated with the same respect afforded to white passengers. The all-too-familiar weight of this reality settled heavily on his shoulders. No matter your achievements, your education, your wealth, or your status, in some people's eyes, your skin color would always define how you deserve to be treated. His father's warning from their phone call echoed painfully in his mind. Some people choose not to listen. What would you do if you were in Marcus's position? Comment number 1 if you would fight this injustice all the way to the top. Or number 2 if you would focus on getting to San Francisco by any means necessary for your presentation. This story highlights how quickly discrimination can escalate, from subtle to life-altering. Hit that like button if you're standing with Marcus against this blatant injustice. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, confirming what Marcus already knew. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a situation in the cabin, we'll be returning to Atlanta. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, centering himself for what was coming next. The presentation, the investors, his team waiting in San Francisco, all now secondary to the more immediate challenge of maintaining his dignity in the face of systemic injustice playing out at 30,000 feet. How would this end? Would anyone stand up for what was right? The answers awaited him at the gate in Atlanta, where this routine business trip had transformed into something much more significant. A public test case of whether America's promises of equality extended to first class or remained perpetually out of reach. The aircraft touched down in Atlanta with a jarring thud that seemed to punctuate the gravity of Marcus's situation. As the plane taxied back to the terminal, a heavy silence blanketed the first-class cabin. Other passengers studiously avoided, looking in Marcus's direction, their discomfort with the unfolding injustice manifesting as studied indifference. Only Tiana Washington from economy class maintained steady eye contact whenever possible, her expression conveying solidarity and outrage on his behalf. Marcus nodded slightly in acknowledgement, grateful for the lone public ally in this increasingly isolating experience. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom once more. Ladies and gentlemen, we've returned to Atlanta due to a passenger situation. Once we reach the gate, we ask that you remain seated until authorities have resolved the matter. We apologize for the inconvenience and delay to your travel plans. The framing of the announcement sent a clear message. Marcus was due, now officially classified as a situation requiring authorities rather than a customer who had been mistreated. The linguistic shift from passenger to problem was complete. Marcus used these final moments to gather his belongings and assess his damaged laptop. The screen remained black, unresponsive to his attempts to power it on. 3 years of research, proprietary algorithms, and his meticulously crafted presentation, potentially lost in a single moment of racially motivated hostility. He carefully packed the device into his bag, hoping against hope that the IT team might be able to recover the data. As the aircraft door opened, 2 uniformed airport security officers and an airline manager in a crisp suit appeared in the jetway. Their purposeful stride and serious expressions made their mission clear. They had come for Marcus. Michael Reynolds approached Marcus's seat with barely concealed satisfaction. "Sir, these officers will escort you to the terminal where you can discuss this matter further with our customer service team." Marcus stood calmly, his considerable height and dignified bearing causing a momentary flicker of uncertainty in Reynolds's expression. "To be perfectly clear," Marcus stated in a measured tone that carried throughout the quiet cabin, "I am being removed from this flight because I requested coffee, had it spilled on me, and then asked for appropriate assistance with burns and damaged property." Reynolds's jaw tightened. "You're being removed because your behavior has disrupted this flight and made other passengers uncomfortable." "What specific behavior?" Marcus pressed, aware that documentation of this moment could be crucial later. "Please articulate exactly what I've done that warrants removal." The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Reynolds gestured to the security officers. "This passenger needs to deplane immediately so we can resume our service to San Francisco." The security officers moved forward, flanking Marcus. The older of the two, an African-American man with graying temples, spoke with professional detachment. "Sir, we need you to come with us without further disruption." Marcus recognized the position these officers were in. They had been summoned to remove a problem with only the airline's version of events to guide them. He nodded, determined to maintain his dignity. "I'll comply, of course," he said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "But I want it on record that I have not raised my voice, made threats, or done anything that would warrant this treatment. I've simply asked to be treated with the same respect given to other passengers after experiencing both poor service and physical injury." The younger security officer, a white man in his 30s, shifted uncomfortably, but maintained his professional demeanor. "Sir, please gather your belongings and come with us. We can sort this out in the terminal." As Marcus collected his carry-on items, he noticed Bradley Coleman studiously avoiding eye contact. The man who had made the fateful comment about not spilling on anyone important now seemed intensely interested in his phone, deliberately distancing himself from the consequences of his words. "Mr. Coleman," Marcus addressed him directly, causing Bradley to look up with startled discomfort. "You witnessed everything that happened here today. I hope you'll reflect on your role in it." Bradley's face flushed red. "I didn't do anything," he muttered defensively. "This is between you and the airline staff." Before Marcus could respond, Tiana Washington stood up in economy class. "This is wrong, and everyone on this plane knows it," she called out. "He didn't do anything except ask to be treated fairly." Reynolds immediately moved toward her. "Ma'am, if you continue disrupting this flight, you'll be removed as well." "I'd rather stand with the truth than sit comfortably with injustice," Tiana replied, though she remained by her seat, clearly weighing the consequences of further action. The older security officer gently guided Marcus toward the exit. "Let's continue this conversation in the terminal, sir. This isn't helping your situation." Marcus nodded, recognizing the wisdom in the officer's subtle communication. Fighting this battle in the confined space of the aircraft, surrounded by airline staff who had already decided he was the problem, would only further damage his position. As he moved toward the exit, Marcus maintained perfect posture, his expression composed despite the turmoil within. He wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. His father had taught him long ago that in situations like this, dignity was sometimes the only power left to him. Walking through first class, Marcus noted the varied reactions of other passengers. Some looked away in shame. Others watched with detached curiosity, as if observing an interesting social experiment rather than a human being experiencing injustice. A few seemed relieved that the problem was being removed, allowing their journey to continue uninterrupted by uncomfortable realities. The walk down the jetway felt interminable, each step taking Marcus further from his professional responsibilities in San Francisco and deeper into a familiar American narrative. A successful black man finding that achievement offered no shield against prejudice. In the terminal, the airline manager, whose nameplate identified her as Patricia Donovan, attempted to take control of the situation. "Mr. Johnson, I understand there's been an unfortunate incident aboard our aircraft. If you'll come with me to our customer service office. We can discuss this privately." "I appreciate that offer," Marcus replied carefully. "But before we move to a private space, I'd like to clarify exactly why I've been removed from this flight." Donovan's professional smile remained fixed. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding our beverage service that escalated to a point where the captain felt it necessary to return to the gate." "That's an interesting characterization," Marcus observed. "The misunderstanding involved your flight attendant spilling hot coffee on me and my laptop after repeatedly refusing service, then failing to provide any assistance for the resulting burns. When I requested appropriate help, I was treated as if I was creating a problem rather than experiencing one." Donovan's smile faltered slightly. "We take all customer concerns seriously, Mr. Johnson. If you'll just come with me." "I will, but first I need to contact my team in San Francisco. I was scheduled to deliver a keynote presentation at the Green Tech Summit in 4 hours. That's now impossible due to your airline's actions. I need to inform them immediately." The mention of the prestigious conference and his keynote status caused a subtle shift in Donovan's demeanor. Suddenly, the possibility that Marcus might not be just any passenger but someone with influence and connections seemed to register. "Of course you can make that call, but I assure you, we may be able to get you on the next available flight to San Francisco if we can resolve this quickly." As Marcus reached for his phone, the terminal doors opened and Tiana Washington emerged, walking briskly toward them. "Excuse me," she called out, approaching the group. "I witnessed everything that happened on that plane, and I want to provide my statement before you take this gentleman away." The security officers exchanged glances, clearly not anticipating an independent witness stepping forward. Donovan's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing annoyance at this complication. "Ma'am, this is a matter between our airline and Mr. Johnson. We appreciate your concern, but—" "My name is Tiana Washington," she interrupted firmly. "I'm a civil rights attorney with the Justice Coalition, and what I witnessed on that flight was textbook discrimination and customer mistreatment. I'd like to provide my contact information to Mr. Johnson and to you, as I expect this matter will require further discussion." The revelation of Tiana's profession altered the dynamic instantly. Donovan's approach shifted from containment to damage control. The security officers took small steps back, creating distance between themselves and what was clearly evolving into a potentially significant legal situation. Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for Tiana's intervention, frustration at how quickly the airline representative's attitude changed when faced with potential legal consequences, and growing concern about his team waiting in San Francisco. "Thank you, Ms. Washington," he said, extending his hand. "I appreciate your willingness to speak up." As they exchanged contact information, Marcus dialed his father's number. Elijah Johnson answered on the first ring. "Marcus, what's happening?" "Dad, I've been removed from the flight," Marcus explained, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "I won't make the presentation. The airline is claiming I was disruptive after their flight attendant spilled coffee on me and damaged my laptop." There was a moment of silence before Elijah responded, his tone shifting from concerned father to seasoned CEO. "Where are you exactly? Who's with you?" Marcus provided the details while Patricia Donovan watched with increasing discomfort, likely realizing that the problem passenger they had so hastily removed was connected to one of the few black CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. "Stay where you are," Elijah instructed. "I'm sending our legal team and coming myself. Don't sign anything or make any formal statements until we arrive." The call ended just as Stephanie Winters and Michael Reynolds emerged from the jetway, clearly surprised to find Marcus engaged in calm conversation rather than being escorted away. Their expressions darkened further when they spotted Tiana standing beside him. The next few hours would transform what began as a routine flight into a pivotal moment for everyone involved. Marcus's professional future, the airline's reputation, and a much larger conversation about race and accountability in America hung in the balance. As other passengers from Flight 3576 began filing past, some nodding in solidarity, while others hurried by with averted eyes, Marcus steeled himself for the battle ahead. In the terminal of Atlanta International Airport, surrounded by security officers, airline staff, and one unexpected ally, Marcus Johnson stood at a crossroads where personal dignity intersected with public accountability. His father was coming. Legal teams would soon arrive. The presentation in San Francisco might be lost, but something equally important was taking shape in its place, a demand for justice that would echo far beyond this terminal. 3 hours after his removal from Flight 3576, Marcus sat in the airport's executive lounge, the burn on his chest still throbbing beneath a makeshift bandage provided by the airport medical office. His ruined suit jacket hung over a nearby chair. The coffee stains now dried into permanent reminders of the morning's events. The white dress shirt beneath, once impeccable, was similarly damaged, though Marcus had managed to clean himself up somewhat in the restroom. The physical discomfort, however, paled in comparison to the professional crisis unfolding. On the table before him lay his damaged laptop, now examined by an IT specialist from Pinnacle's Atlanta office, who had arrived with remarkable speed following Elijah Johnson's calls. "The news isn't good, Mr. Johnson," the technician said, looking up from the device. "The liquid damaged the motherboard. We might be able to recover the data from the hard drive, but it will take time, certainly not within the next few hours." Marcus nodded, having expected this verdict. "Focus on data recovery then. The presentation files are the priority." His phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications. His team in San Francisco was in crisis mode, attempting to reschedule his keynote while managing the expectations of investors who had specifically come to hear Marcus speak. Social media was beginning to pick up on the incident, with early reports framing it in concerning ways. Flight delayed due to unruly first-class passenger. Disturbance on Atlanta-San Francisco flight forces returned to gate. The narrative was already being shaped, and not in Marcus's favor. Without his direct input, he was being cast as the problem rather than the victim. A familiar pattern that reflected broader societal tendencies to view black assertions of dignity as disruptive or threatening. The lounge door opened, and Elijah Johnson entered with the purposeful stride that had become his trademark in corporate America. At 62, the elder Johnson carried himself with the gravitas earned through decades of breaking barriers in the business world. Behind him followed two people Marcus recognized as Pinnacle's chief legal counsel, Angela Martinez, and the company's head of public relations, David Chen. "Son," Elijah said, embracing Marcus carefully to avoid the burn area. He stepped back, his experienced eyes quickly assessing both the physical and psychological damage. "Tell me everything." For the next 15 minutes, Marcus recounted the events in precise detail. The initial service disparities, Bradley Coleman's comment, the coffee accident, the dismissive response to his injuries, and finally the decision to remove him from the flight. Tiana Washington, who had remained with Marcus throughout, occasionally added her observations as an independent witness. Angela Martinez recorded the conversation while taking detailed notes. David Chen's expression grew increasingly troubled as the full picture emerged. "They've already released a statement," Chen said, showing his tablet to the group. On it was an official airline press release. "This morning, Flight 3576 returned to Atlanta due to a disruptive passenger who became confrontational with our crew following an accidental beverage spill. The safety and comfort of all passengers is our top priority, necessitating the removal of the individual in question. We regret the inconvenience to other passengers and are investigating the incident fully." Elijah's expression hardened as he read the statement. Not a word about the discriminatory service beforehand. Nothing about your burns or damaged property. They're controlling the narrative. Classic damage control strategy, Angela noted. They're establishing their version of events as the official record before any counter-narrative can emerge. Marcus checked his watch. The Green Tech Summit had begun without him. His career-defining moment was slipping away while he sat in an airport lounge dealing with the aftermath of discrimination. "My priority is still getting to San Francisco," he said firmly. "The presentation is being handled," Elijah interrupted, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "I've spoken with the conference organizers. They're rescheduling your keynote for tomorrow morning. We have teams working on retrieving backup files from our servers and reconstructing what might be lost." "And the investors?" "Have been informed of travel complications and are still eager to meet with you. This delay is frustrating, but not fatal to our objectives." With the immediate professional crisis at least temporarily stabilized, Marcus felt some of the tension leave his body, quickly replaced by a deeper awareness of what had actually transpired. Beyond the practical implications to his career and the presentation, he had experienced a raw, public reminder of how quickly his humanity could be diminished based solely on his race. "So what now?" he asked, looking between his father and the legal team. Angela Martinez placed her tablet on the table, revealing several documents already drafted. "Now we address this on multiple fronts. This isn't just about getting you to San Francisco anymore. It's about accountability. I have 4 witnesses from the flight who've already provided contact information," Tiana added, "including an international business traveler who recorded video of the coffee spill and your subsequent treatment." David Chen nodded approvingly. "We need to release our own statement quickly. The longer their version stands unchallenged, the harder it becomes to shift public perception." Elijah Johnson had been uncharacteristically quiet, his fingers steepled before him as he processed everything. Finally, he spoke with the measured tone that had guided Pinnacle through countless corporate challenges. "This incident reflects patterns we've seen throughout our careers and lives," he said, addressing everyone in the room. "The quick criminalization of black assertion, the dismissal of legitimate grievances, the protection of systems rather than individuals harmed by them." He turned to Marcus. "You have a choice to make, son. We can handle this quietly. Use our connections to get you to San Francisco, have our legal team negotiate a private settlement with the airline, and focus entirely on your presentation and technology." Elijah paused, his expression reflecting decades of similar crossroads. "Or we can recognize that what happened today is bigger than one flight or one presentation. We can choose to make this a moment of accountability, not just for this airline, but for all institutions that perpetuate these patterns." The gravity of the decision hung in the air. Marcus understood exactly what his father was asking. Every successful black professional eventually faced this choice: when to accommodate injustice for practical advancement, and when to stand firm, even at personal cost. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a notification. A colleague had sent a link to a social media post that was rapidly gaining traction. "Just witnessed a well-dressed black man removed from first class after flight attendant spilled coffee on him and refused to help. When he asked for assistance with burns, they called security. Flight attendant was smirking as he was escorted off, flying while black." Accompanying the post was a partial video showing Marcus being escorted from the plane, maintaining his dignity, while Stephanie watched with visible satisfaction from the cabin doorway. Have you ever been faced with a difficult choice between standing up for what's right and taking the easier path? Comment number 1, if you believe Marcus should fight this injustice publicly, or number 2, if you think he should focus solely on his career goals. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives come disguised as unwanted challenges. Like this video, if you've ever had to make a tough decision between personal goals and standing up for a greater principle. The conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the lounge door. An airline representative entered, followed by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit and a concerned expression. "Mr. Johnson," he addressed Elijah directly, clearly recognizing the CEO. "William Parker, CEO of Atlantic Airways. I apologize for interrupting, but when I learned what had happened, I wanted to address the situation personally. The airline. CEO's unexpected appearance indicated just how quickly this incident was escalating. William Parker was not a man who typically dealt with individual passenger complaints. His presence suggested the airline was already calculating the potential damage to their reputation and bottom line. "Mr. Parker," Elijah acknowledged coolly, "this is my son Marcus, the passenger your staff decided to remove after spilling coffee on him and refusing medical attention." Parker turned to Marcus with a practiced expression of corporate concern. "Dr. Johnson, I want to personally express my regret for your experience today. This isn't the level of service we strive to provide, particularly to our first-class passengers." The careful framing, positioning the incident as a service failure rather than discrimination, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Marcus noted how Parker's apology focused on his status as a first-class passenger rather than his treatment as a human being. "With all due respect, Mr. Parker," Marcus responded, "what happened today went far beyond poor service. It was a systematic pattern of discriminatory treatment, culminating in physical injury, property damage, and public humiliation." Parker's expression tightened slightly, though his corporate smile remained intact. "We take all allegations of discrimination extremely seriously. I assure you we'll conduct a thorough investigation. In the meantime, we'd like to offer immediate assistance, a flight to San Francisco on our next departure, compensation for your damaged clothing and laptop, and additional consideration for your inconvenience." The offer hung in the air, a traditional corporate solution focused on individual accommodation rather than systemic accountability. It was the path of least resistance, designed to contain the situation and prevent wider scrutiny of the airline's culture and practices. Marcus glanced at his father, whose slight head tilt conveyed volumes of understanding about this familiar, corporate tactic. They had seen it countless times, the quick settlement offer intended to silence rather than solve. The choice before Marcus clarified in that moment. He could accept the airline's offer, catch the next flight, deliver his presentation a day late and move forward with his career. The practical path, the path of individual success. Or he could recognize that his position of privilege as the son of a CEO gave him a platform and protection that many other black passengers who experienced similar treatment would never have. He could use this moment to demand more than personal compensation, to require institutional change. As Marcus weighed these options, Tiana Washington quietly pulled up another social media post on her phone and placed it on the table where everyone could see it. It showed a collection of similar accounts from minority passengers who had experienced discriminatory treatment on the same airline, all with the same hashtag, #unflying_while_black. Marcus's decision would affect not just his immediate future, but potentially the experiences of countless other passengers who would board flights after him. The technology presentation in San Francisco might change the future of energy storage, but his response to this moment might change something equally important: the expectation of dignity and equal treatment regardless of race. The path forward was becoming clear, though not easy. In the executive lounge of Atlanta International Airport, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and witnesses, Marcus Johnson prepared to transform a moment of injustice into a movement for accountability that would extend far beyond one flight or one airline. "Mr. Parker," Marcus began, his voice steady with newfound resolve, "we have much to discuss, but it won't be about getting me on the next flight to San Francisco." The next 4 hours transformed the private airport lounge into a war room of strategic planning. Elijah Johnson had summoned additional Pinnacle executives, creating a multidisciplinary team working on parallel tracks to address both the immediate, professional crisis and the larger issue of accountability for the airline's actions. Marcus, having changed into fresh clothing brought by his father's assistant, moved with renewed purpose. The physical transformation from victim to challenger was complete. His coffee-stained suit replaced by a sharp charcoal gray ensemble that projected authority and confidence. The burn on his chest had been properly treated by a private physician, though it would leave a scar, a permanent reminder of this pivotal day. "We're approaching this on 3 fronts," Elijah explained to the assembled team, his commanding presence centering the room. "First, salvaging Marcus's presentation and professional objectives. Second, gathering and preserving evidence of what transpired today. Third, developing a response strategy that ensures accountability rather than just personal compensation. Marcus observed his father with admiration. This was Elijah Johnson in his element, the strategic mastermind who had built Pinnacle, from a small tech startup into a Fortune 500 company despite the systemic barriers faced by Black-owned businesses in America. Now those same skills were being deployed to transform a personal injustice into a catalyst for change. The tech team had made significant progress. "We've recovered about 80% of the presentation files from cloud backups," reported Jamal Williams, Pinnacle's chief information officer. "The proprietary algorithms are secure on our servers. We're reconstructing the few missing elements based on development notes in previous versions. The conference organizers have been exceptionally accommodating," added Zoe Chen, Marcus's executive assistant who had flown in from San Francisco. "Your keynote has been rescheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. The Japanese investors specifically requested that we maintain their private meeting afterward, regardless of the timing change." With the professional crisis stabilizing, attention turned to the evidence-gathering effort. Angela Martinez, Pinnacle's chief legal counsel, displayed a digital evidence board on her tablet. "We've secured statements from 7 witnesses so far," she reported. "Most significantly, this gentleman." She played a video from a Dutch business traveler who had been seated across the aisle from Marcus. The crystal-clear footage showed the coffee being spilled with no turbulence whatsoever, Stephanie's dismissive response, and Marcus's calm, measured reaction despite his obvious pain. "Additionally," Angela continued, "our background research on Stephanie Winters has yielded interesting results. There have been 8 formal complaints filed against her in the past 3 years, 6 by passengers of color, citing rude behavior, discriminatory service, and unprofessional conduct. All were dismissed after internal reviews." 8 complaints and she still has her job? Tiana Washington shook her head in disbelief. "That suggests a systemic issue with how the airline handles discrimination claims." "Exactly," Angela agreed. "This isn't an isolated incident, but a pattern. We've also identified 3 other cases where passengers of color were removed from this airline's flights after reporting mistreatment. All were handled with confidential settlements and non-disclosure agreements." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "So the airline's standard procedure is to silence individual complaints rather than address the underlying culture." "The pattern is consistent," Angela confirmed. "Contain, compensate, and conceal rather than correct." Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. The airline CEO was calling again, his 3rd attempt in the past hour. The initial meeting had ended with Parker clearly unsettled by Marcus's refusal to accept the quick settlement and move on. Since then, Pinnacle's growing mobilization and the escalating social media attention had apparently increased his urgency. "He's feeling the pressure," Elijah observed. "Their stock has already dropped 2% since that video started circulating." Marcus declined the call, following their agreed strategy of maintaining leverage by controlling the timing of further engagement. "He'll have to wait until we're ready with our terms." David Chen, heading up the public relations response, provided his update next. "Social media traction is growing exponentially. The hashtag Justice for Marcus Johnson is trending nationally. We've received media inquiries from major networks and publications." He displayed a draft statement on his screen. "This is our proposed public response, acknowledging what happened without inflammatory language, focusing on the factual timeline, and calling for accountability and policy changes rather than just individual consequences." Marcus reviewed the statement carefully. It was measured yet firm, framing the incident within the larger context of ongoing discrimination in customer service settings. The language was precise, the tone dignified, but unyielding in its call for substantive change. "This strikes the right balance," he approved. "Professional but uncompromising on the core issues." As the team continued refining their strategy, Bradley Coleman's name appeared on Marcus's phone. The investment banker who had made the fateful comment about not spilling on anyone important was now reaching out. "Interesting timing," Marcus remarked, showing the call to his father. "Very," Elijah agreed. "I think we should hear what he has to say." Marcus answered, putting the call on speaker. "This is Marcus Johnson." Marcus, it's Bradley Coleman. The voice sounded strained, lacking the casual confidence from their earlier interaction on the plane. I'm calling about what happened today. I feel terrible about how everything unfolded. Do you? Marcus responded neutrally, giving nothing away. Yes, the situation got completely out of hand. I want you to know I never intended for anything like that to happen with my comment. It was just a joke that was taken the wrong way. The non-apology apology. Deflecting responsibility while positioning himself as misunderstood rather than acknowledging the impact of his words. It was textbook privilege protection. What exactly are you calling about, Mr. Coleman? Marcus pressed. A pause, then. Well, I'm concerned about how this incident might be portrayed. My firm has many diverse clients, and if my name gets dragged into this as somehow instigating what happened. And there it was. Not concern for Marcus or the injustice that occurred, but worry about potential damage to his own reputation and business interests. So you're calling to protect yourself, Marcus clarified. I'm calling to clear the air, Bradley countered, his tone growing defensive. We're both businessmen. I'm sure we can come to an understanding about how this gets discussed publicly. Angela Martinez silently slid a note across the table. Ask if he's recording this call. Are you recording this conversation, Mr. Coleman? Marcus asked directly. Another telling pause. No, this is just between us, man to man. I see. Well, Mr. Coleman, I appreciate your call, but any discussion about this incident should include my legal team. I'll have them contact you if necessary. Wait, there's no need to make this illegal. Marcus ended the call, looking to Angela. He was recording, wasn't he? Almost certainly, she confirmed, trying to get you to make statements that could be used to minimize his role or contradict your account later. Standard tactic. Elijah shook his head. That call wasn't actually about clearing the air. Someone put him up to it. The airline? Marcus suggested. Possibly, Angela considered. Or his firm, worried about association with a discrimination incident. Either way, it confirms they're in damage control mode, which gives us leverage. The strategic planning continued into the evening, with Marcus dividing his attention between preparation for his rescheduled presentation and the developing response to the airline incident. It was exhausting but necessary work, ensuring that neither his professional goals nor the accountability effort would be compromised. Around 8 that evening, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tiana Washington received a call from a former colleague who now worked for the Federal Aviation Administration. You're not going to believe this, Tiana announced after ending the call. The FAA has received multiple reports about this exact flight crew over the past year. They've been monitoring the situation but lacked sufficient evidence for formal action. That changes with our documentation, Angela noted, immediately grasping the significance. Exactly. The FAA representative wants to speak with Marcus as part of their investigation. This development shifted the dynamic dramatically. What had begun as an individual customer service dispute had now attracted federal regulatory attention, elevating the stakes for the airline and adding institutional weight to Marcus's case. As midnight approached, Marcus stepped away from the strategy session to call his team in San Francisco, confirming final arrangements for tomorrow's presentation. Despite the chaos of the day, he felt a strange clarity of purpose. The incident that had threatened his professional moment had instead expanded his platform and impact in unexpected ways. When he returned to the main discussion, Elijah was reviewing their list of demands for the airline. 1. Immediate suspension pending investigation of all involved staff. 2. Comprehensive audit of discrimination complaints and handling procedures. 3. Mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees. 4. Revision of policies regarding passenger removal to require multiple levels of approval. 5. Establishment of an independent review board for discrimination claims. 6. Public commitment to measurable diversity and inclusion benchmarks. These aren't suggestions, Elijah emphasized. These are requirements for resolution. William Parker had called 5 more times throughout the evening, each message increasingly urgent as the airline's stock continued to slide and media inquiries multiplied. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically in just 12 hours. "We'll meet with him tomorrow after your presentation," Elijah decided. From a position of strength, with media attention at its peak and our evidence fully compiled. As the strategy session finally concluded, Marcus found himself alone with his father in the hotel suite they'd moved to for the night. For the first time since the incident, he allowed himself to feel the full emotional weight of what had transpired. The humiliation, anger, and profound weariness that came with fighting battles that shouldn't need to be fought. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I were just an ordinary passenger," Marcus admitted. "Without your resources, without Pinnacle's legal team, without witnesses volunteering to help." Elijah placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "That's exactly why we can't let this go. Our privilege comes with responsibility. We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who boards a plane hoping simply to be treated with basic human dignity." Outside their hotel window, Atlanta's skyline glittered against the night sky. The same city where Martin Luther King Jr. had once spoken of dreams and dignity, where generations had fought for the simple right to be treated as equals. That moment, Marcus understood that his father's success and his own achievements were not just personal triumphs, but links in a longer chain of progress. Tomorrow would bring his rescheduled presentation in San Francisco, the confrontation with the airline leadership, and the public spotlight on issues far larger than one spilled coffee. Marcus Johnson prepared for both battles, the professional challenge he had trained for, and the unexpected fight for accountability that had found him. Neither would be easy, but both were necessary. As he finally lay down to rest, Marcus felt something unexpected amid the exhaustion, a sense of purpose that transcended even his groundbreaking technology. Sometimes leadership meant creating new paths forward, not just in business, but in human dignity. The following morning found Marcus Johnson standing backstage at the Green Tech Summit in San Francisco, reviewing his reconstructed presentation one final time. The journey from Atlanta had been a whirlwind, a private charter arranged by Pinnacle's board members, a police escort from the airport to accommodate the tight schedule, and now mere minutes until he would take the stage before the most influential gathering in sustainable technology. Despite sleeping only 3 hours, Marcus projected calm confidence in a fresh suit. This one, a deep blue that his father had always maintained was the color of authority. The recovery team had successfully restored his presentation files, and Pinnacle's engineers had worked through the night to ensure every detail of his groundbreaking technology was properly represented. 5 minutes, Dr. Johnson, a conference coordinator informed him, clearly relieved that the keynote speaker had made it despite the widely reported incident. Marcus nodded, taking a deep, centering breath. The past 24 hours had been extraordinary by any measure, but he compartmentalized those emotions now, focusing entirely on the technological innovation that had been his passion for 3 years. From the wings, he could see the packed auditorium, over 2,000 attendees, including the world's leading energy executives, environmental advocates, government officials, and venture capitalists. In the front row sat the Japanese investors, whose potential funding could accelerate his technology's development by years. Beside them, unexpectedly, was his father, who had arrived just moments earlier after coordinating the ongoing response to the airline incident from the Pinnacle corporate jet. The conference director approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to present our keynote speaker, despite some unexpected travel challenges that made headlines yesterday." A knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. His work in renewable energy storage promises to fundamentally transform our relationship with sustainable power. Please welcome Dr. Marcus Johnson, Chief Innovation Officer of Pinnacle Technologies. The applause was enthusiastic as Marcus strode onto the stage, his posture impeccable, his expression composed yet engaging. He took position at the center of the stage rather than behind the podium, commanding the space with quiet authority. "Thank you for that welcome," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "And thank you for your flexibility with the schedule adjustment." A slight smile crossed his face. "I had planned to open with a joke about the challenges of air travel, but recent events have made that a bit too on the nose." The audience laughed, the tension broken. Marcus had acknowledged the elephant in the room without allowing it to dominate the moment. This presentation would be about his technology, not yesterday's discrimination. What I'd like to discuss today is something far more important than one difficult flight, he continued. It's about persistence through obstacles, about systems that resist change, about transformation that comes not despite resistance, but because of our commitment to push through it. With that elegant bridge, Marcus launched into his presentation, detailing the revolutionary battery storage technology that promised to solve renewable energy's greatest challenge: consistent power delivery regardless of weather conditions or time of day. For the next 45 minutes, he commanded the room with expertise and vision, explaining complex technical concepts with clarity while never losing sight of the human impact of his innovation. The technology would make renewable energy viable for communities across the economic spectrum, democratizing access to clean power and reducing costs by unprecedented margins. As he demonstrated the scalability of the system, from individual homes to entire power grids, Marcus noticed several industry competitors in the audience shifting uncomfortably in their seats. His breakthrough threatened existing business models that profited from energy scarcity and centralized control. Among those competitors, Marcus spotted a familiar face: Bradley Coleman, the investment banker from the flight, representing financial interests heavily invested in traditional energy infrastructure. Their eyes met briefly, Coleman quickly, looking away with a flush of discomfort. The connection between them suddenly clicked for Marcus. Coleman's presence at this specific conference wasn't coincidental. He represented investors with stakes in competing technologies, making his behavior on the flight even more suspect. Marcus continued seamlessly. The implications for developing nations are particularly significant. Areas without established power infrastructure can leapfrog directly to renewable microgrids using this storage technology, similar to how mobile phones allowed them to skip landline installation. The presentation reached its climax with a live demonstration, a scaled model of the battery system powering a miniature grid under simulated extreme conditions. The audience watched in stunned silence as the system maintained stable output, despite variable inputs, solving a challenge that had stumped engineers for decades. When Marcus concluded, the response was immediate and overwhelming, a standing ovation that rolled through the auditorium like a wave. Energy executives who had entered as skeptics now stood applauding, recognizing the paradigm shift they had just witnessed. The Japanese investors exchanged meaningful glances, clearly impressed by both the technology and the presenter's composure despite the previous day's events. As Marcus fielded questions with precision and depth, news alerts began appearing on attendees' phones. The airline CEO had issued a public statement regarding yesterday's incident, announcing that flight attendants Stephanie Winters and Michael Reynolds had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The statement carefully avoided admitting discrimination, but acknowledged serious concerns about passenger treatment and promised appropriate corrective actions. This development confirmed what Marcus and his father had suspected. The airline was belatedly attempting damage control as public pressure mounted. Social media continued to amplify the incident, with the video of Marcus's removal approaching 20 million views and mainstream media outlets now covering the story as part of a larger pattern of discrimination in commercial aviation. After the presentation, Marcus was surrounded by potential partners and investors, their business cards accumulating in his pocket as he navigated the enthusiastic crowd. The Japanese investment group requested an immediate private meeting, unable to wait for their scheduled appointment later that day. Dr. Johnson, their lead representative, began once they were seated in a conference room. "We came prepared to be impressed by your technology. We did not expect to be equally impressed by your character under extraordinary circumstances." The representative slid a preliminary term sheet across the table, offering funding that exceeded Marcus's highest expectations. "We value innovation, but we also value integrity and resilience. You have demonstrated all three. We would be honored to partner with Pinnacle on this technology." As Marcus reviewed the terms, his phone buzzed with a message from his father. "Airline CEO requesting urgent meeting at 3 p.m. Our terms, our turf. Bring presentation backup to demonstrate actual damages." The professional triumph and the accountability effort were now running on parallel tracks, both gaining momentum. Marcus excused himself from the investors after confirming their remarkable offer, promising to reconnect later that day with Pinnacle's legal team to formalize the agreement. In the corridor outside, he encountered Tiana Washington, who had flown to San Francisco that morning to continue supporting the case against the airline. Her presence had evolved from chance witness to dedicated advocate, her legal expertise proving invaluable to their strategy. "That was phenomenal," she said, having watched the presentation from the back of the auditorium. "You didn't let yesterday break your focus at all." "Years of practice," Marcus replied with a tired smile. "My father always says excellence is non-negotiable, especially when others are looking for any excuse to dismiss you." They moved to a quieter area, where Tiana updated him on the latest developments. "The airline is in full crisis mode. Their stock is down nearly 5%. 2 major corporate clients have publicly announced they're reviewing their contracts, and there's more." She showed him her tablet, displaying internal airline communications that had been provided by a whistleblower employee. The documents revealed that Stephanie Winters had been the subject of multiple passenger complaints specifically regarding treatment of minority passengers, yet had received promotions and positive performance reviews despite these incidents. "This proves they were aware of the pattern and chose to ignore it," Tiana explained. "It transforms this from an isolated incident to a systemic failure with potential class action implications." Marcus studied the documents carefully. "How did you get these?" "After the video went viral, 3 current employees came forward independently with documentation. They've apparently been raising concerns internally for years without result. Your case became the tipping point." This revelation added another dimension to the upcoming meeting with the airline CEO. What had begun as personal injustice had catalyzed a much larger reckoning within the organization, emboldening employees who had witnessed discriminatory practices but lacked the platform to address them. As Marcus and Tiana made their way to the hotel where they would meet William Parker, they passed a television displaying breaking news. The Chiron read, "Exclusive. Investment banker involved in airline. Discrimination incident has ties to competing energy companies." On screen was Bradley Coleman's professional photograph, alongside details of his firm's investments in traditional energy infrastructure, direct competitors to Marcus's renewable technology. The reporter was questioning whether Coleman's behavior on the flight might have been motivated by more than casual prejudice, potentially representing an attempt to disrupt a business rival's important presentation. "That's interesting timing," Marcus observed, watching Coleman's carefully constructed professional image unravel in real time. "Karma works in mysterious ways," Tiana replied. "Though in this case I suspect karma had help from your father's investigative team." When they arrived at the hotel suite designated for the meeting with William Parker, they found Elijah Johnson already present with Angela Martinez and David Chen. The space had been deliberately arranged to establish psychological advantage. Parker would be seated in a lower chair, facing multiple representatives from Pinnacle across a broad table. "The presentation was extraordinary," Elijah told his son with quiet pride. "Even watching remotely, I could see you had them captivated. The funding offer from Tokyo is just the beginning." "Thank you," Marcus replied. "But right now, I'm more focused on the meeting ahead." "As you should be," Elijah agreed. "This isn't just about yesterday anymore. This is about changing practices that affect thousands of passengers." At precisely 3 o'clock, William Parker arrived. The airline CEO looked markedly different from their previous encounter, his confident executive demeanor replaced by the wary expression of someone facing a crisis that threatened both his company's reputation and his personal legacy. "Thank you for meeting with me," Parker began, declining the offered refreshments. "I wanted to discuss this situation directly, without intermediaries." "We appreciate that," Elijah responded coolly. "Though I'm curious why you felt yesterday wasn't the appropriate time for such directness." Parker shifted uncomfortably. "The situation was still developing. We needed to conduct preliminary inquiries before addressing the substantive issues. And those inquiries have led you to place the involved employees on leave," Marcus noted, "suggesting your investigation has already found cause for concern." "We take all allegations of misconduct seriously," Parker replied with practiced caution. "The administrative leave is standard procedure, not an admission of wrongdoing." Angela. Martinez opened a folder containing the whistleblower documents. "Mr. Parker, we have internal communication showing that Stephanie Winters has been the subject of 6 previous complaints specifically regarding discriminatory treatment of minority passengers. Yet she received a promotion last year and excellent performance reviews." The color drained from Parker's face as he realized they possessed internal documents. "I'm not personally familiar with every flight attendant's personnel file. As CEO, you're responsible for the culture that determines how such complaints are handled," Elijah stated firmly. "A culture that apparently dismisses documented patterns of discrimination and retaliates against employees who report concerns." Parker's defensive posture crumbled visibly. For several moments he sat in silence, seeming to calculate his rapidly diminishing options. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted from corporate damage control to something approaching genuine concern. "What do you want from this situation? I assume you've prepared specific demands." Marcus leaned forward. "What we want is meaningful change, not just cosmetic adjustments or private compensation. This incident reflects systemic issues that affect countless passengers who don't have the resources or platform to demand accountability." He slid a document across the table, the same list of requirements they had developed the previous day, now formalized on pinnacle letterhead. Parker reviewed it silently, his expression growing increasingly sober as he recognized the comprehensive nature of the demands. "This goes far beyond standard resolution procedures," he finally said. "You're asking for a complete overhaul of our training, policies, and accountability structures. We're asking for what should already exist at any company committed to treating all customers with equal dignity," Marcus corrected him. "The fact that you see these basic requirements as extraordinary is precisely the problem." The meeting continued for nearly 2 hours, evolving from tense confrontation to substantive negotiation. Parker, recognizing both the legal exposure and public relations disaster facing his company, gradually moved from resistance to reluctant acceptance of most demands. By late afternoon, they had reached a preliminary agreement that would transform the airline's approach to bias complaints, establish new training requirements, create an independent review board, and implement accountability metrics with public reporting. The settlement would include financial compensation for Marcus's damaged property and missed connections. But more importantly, it would drive systemic changes affecting every passenger. As the meeting concluded, Parker asked a final question that revealed how fundamentally he had misunderstood the situation from the beginning. "I'm still curious. Would you have pursued this so aggressively if you weren't Elijah Johnson's son? If you didn't have these resources at your disposal?" Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "The better question, Mr. Parker, is how many passengers without my resources have suffered similar discrimination without the ability to hold your airline accountable? This was never about who I am. It was about recognizing who we all deserve, to be treated as human beings worthy of dignity and respect, regardless of our skin color or connections." As Parker departed, visibly humbled by the encounter, Marcus turned to his father. "We did what needed to be done here. Now I need to get back to the investors and finalize that funding agreement. Yesterday's crisis doesn't change today's opportunity." Elijah nodded with approval. "That's the balance I've always tried to teach you, fighting necessary battles without losing sight of the future you're building." The day that had begun with Marcus standing alone on a stage had evolved into something much more significant, a demonstration that excellence and accountability could advance together, that standing firm against injustice didn't require sacrificing professional goals. It was a lesson that would shape not just Marcus's career, but his understanding of his place in the continuing struggle for equal treatment in America. As evening fell over San Francisco, news of both developments spread. The revolutionary technology that promised to transform renewable energy, and the unprecedented accountability agreement that promised to address discriminatory practices in commercial aviation. Different as they were, both represented the same core principle. Systems could change when people refused to accept the limitations of the status quo. For Marcus Johnson, it had been both the most challenging and most consequential 24 hours of his professional life. A crucible that tested not just his resilience, but his understanding of the responsibility that came with his position and privilege. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had brought the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, standing your ground was its own form of moving forward. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have fought for systemic change or accepted a private settlement to focus on your career? Like and subscribe if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The conclusion of this powerful story will reveal the lasting impact of Marcus's decision. 3 months after the fateful flight, Marcus Johnson stood at the window of his San Francisco office, gazing at the panoramic view of the bay. The morning sun glinted off the water, casting the entire landscape in a golden glow that matched his reflective mood. On his desk lay the morning's headlines: Atlantic Airways launches industry-leading anti-bias training program. Johnson Battery Technology secures $300 million in additional funding. Former flight attendant speaks out about culture of discrimination at major airlines. The journey from that moment of scalding coffee and public humiliation to this morning's triumphant headlines had been extraordinary by any measure. What could have remained a personal indignity had instead catalyzed substantial change, both for Marcus's career and for thousands of airline passengers who would never know his name. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His executive assistant entered with a tablet displaying the day's schedule. "The implementation team from Atlantic Airways will be here at 11, she reminded him. "They want your input on the final training modules before the national rollout next month." Marcus nodded. "And the Pinnacle Foundation meeting?" 2 o'clock. "Your father will join virtually from Atlanta. The first round of scholarship recipients has been selected for review." "Perfect, thank you." As his assistant departed, Marcus returned to the window, reflecting on how completely his professional life had transformed. The Japanese investment had been just the beginning. Once his presentation video from the Green Tech Summit went viral, partly due to the publicity surrounding the discrimination incident, interest in his battery technology had exploded. Major manufacturing partners had signed on. Government contracts were being negotiated. Construction had begun on the first full-scale production facility. The technology that promised to make renewable energy consistently reliable and affordable was moving from concept to reality at unprecedented speed. Equally significant were the changes at Atlantic Airways. True to the agreement negotiated that tense afternoon in San Francisco, the airline had implemented comprehensive reforms that went far beyond superficial damage control. Stephanie Winters and Michael Reynolds had indeed been terminated following a thorough investigation that uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior beyond even what the whistleblowers had initially revealed. The airline had established an independent review board for discrimination complaints, with representation from civil rights organizations and customer advocates. The board had authority to override internal decisions and recommend policy changes. A mandatory anti-bias training program had been developed, with input from diversity experts and affected passengers, including Marcus himself. All customer-facing employees were required to complete the training, with regular refresher courses. Most significantly, Atlantic Airways had implemented transparent reporting of discrimination complaints and resolutions, publishing quarterly statistics that created accountability and allowed measurement of progress. These changes hadn't come easily. There had been resistance from middle management, skepticism from industry observers, and initial reluctance from the board of directors. But the combination of public pressure, legal exposure, and William Parker's belated recognition of the moral imperative had ultimately prevailed. Marcus's phone chimed with a text message from Tiana, Washington. "Just landed in SF. Court approved the class action settlement this morning. Historic victory. See you at 3 p.m. to celebrate?" He smiled as he replied affirmatively. The relationship that had begun with Tiana as a chance witness had evolved into both a professional collaboration and a genuine friendship. Her legal expertise had proven invaluable in transforming Marcus's individual case into a class action lawsuit representing dozens of passengers who had experienced similar discrimination. The settlement, finalized just today, established a substantial compensation fund for affected passengers, and mandated similar reforms across multiple airlines. What had begun as one incident on one flight had expanded into an industry-wide reckoning with practices that had gone unchallenged for too long. A video call notification appeared on Marcus's computer screen, his father calling from Atlanta. "Morning, son," Elijah greeted him, his expression conveying pride without needing words. "Quite a day for headlines." "Indeed," Marcus acknowledged, "though I'm more interested in the changes behind those headlines." "As you should be. The funding is impressive, but the airline reforms will affect more lives in the immediate term." Elijah paused, studying his son's face. "Any regrets about how we handled this?" Marcus considered the question seriously. There had been costs to their approach, the stress of public attention, the time diverted from pure innovation to advocacy, the inevitable backlash from those who resented being held accountable. "None," he finally answered. "We could have taken their initial offer, gotten me on the next flight, accepted a private settlement. The technology would still have succeeded, but we would have missed the opportunity to address the larger pattern." Elijah nodded approvingly. Some victories aren't measured in dollars or even individual success. Sometimes the true measure is in how many doors stay open for those coming after you. Their conversation shifted to the Pinnacle Foundation, the new organization they had established in the wake of the incident. Using a portion of the settlement funds and corporate contributions, the foundation provided scholarships and mentoring for minority students pursuing careers in technology, with a special focus on sustainable energy innovation. "The first cohort of scholars is exceptional," Elijah reported. 25 young people who might not otherwise have had these opportunities. Including Tiana's younger brother, Marcus noted. This unexpected connection had emerged during their work together. Learning that Tiana's brother was a gifted engineering student whose financial constraints had limited his educational options. "He was selected on merit alone," Elijah clarified, though the connection is a nice symmetry to this story. After concluding the call with his father, Marcus turned his attention to preparation for the upcoming meetings. The implementation team from Atlantic Airways would need clear guidance on the training modules, ensuring they addressed the subtle forms of bias that often went unrecognized even by those perpetuating them. As he reviewed the materials, his mind drifted to Bradley Coleman. The investment banker's professional reputation had suffered significant damage when his connections to competing energy companies were exposed. The implication that he might have deliberately contributed to disrupting a business rival's presentation had triggered an SEC investigation into potential conflicts of interest and ethical violations. Coleman had attempted to contact Marcus several times in the weeks following the incident, each message more desperate than the last as his professional standing deteriorated. Marcus had not responded. Some accountability processes needed to unfold without his intervention. At 11 o'clock precisely, the Atlantic Airways implementation team arrived, led by their newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, a respected civil rights attorney specifically recruited for this role. The team presented the final training materials for Marcus's review. "We've incorporated your feedback about addressing unconscious bias in service prioritization," the CDO explained. "The modules now include specific scenarios based on documented incidents, though names and identifying details have been changed." Marcus reviewed the materials with careful attention. "This is significantly improved. I particularly appreciate the emphasis on creating a culture where employees feel empowered to speak up when they witness problematic behavior." That cultural shift has been the most challenging aspect, the CDO admitted. Many employees fear retaliation if they report colleagues or question established practices, which is why the independent review board and whistleblower protections are so crucial, Marcus noted. "People need to know they'll be supported when they stand for what's right." The meeting continued productively, with Marcus offering insights from both his personal experience and the broader research on bias in customer service environments. By its conclusion, both sides expressed satisfaction with the training program that would soon be implemented across Atlantic Airways' entire operation. As the airline representatives departed, Marcus received another text, this one from his executive assistant. "Reminder, you promised to call your mother before the Gita Foundation meeting. He smiled at the gentle prompt. Despite his packed schedule, family remained the cornerstone of his life, the source of both his values and his resilience. He dialed his mother's number. "There's my world-changing son," Dr. Catherine Johnson answered warmly. A distinguished professor of sociology, she had provided valuable perspective throughout the airline incident and its aftermath. "How are you holding up with all this attention?" "Managing," Marcus replied honestly. "Some days it feels overwhelming to balance the technology rollout with the advocacy work. But then I remember your favorite quote about privilege and responsibility. 'To whom much is given, much is required,'" she recited. "Though I hope you're finding some personal joy amid all these obligations." "I am," he assured her. "The work itself brings satisfaction, and I've made unexpected connections through this experience." His thoughts turned briefly to Tiana, whose friendship had become increasingly significant in his life. "Your father mentioned the young attorney who stood up for you on the flight. He seems quite impressed with her." "Dad's always on the lookout for talent," Marcus deflected, though his mother's knowing chuckle suggested she suspected there might be more to the story. Their conversation continued briefly before Marcus needed to prepare for the foundation meeting. As he organized his notes, he reflected on how completely his life had changed direction in just 3 months. What had begun as a routine business trip had evolved into a pivotal moment that redefined not just his career, but his understanding of his purpose and responsibility. At 2 o'clock, the Pinnacle Foundation Board convened virtually. The members represented a cross-section of technology leaders, education experts, and community advocates, all committed to diversifying the pipeline of talent entering the sustainable energy field. "Today we review our first cohort of scholars," Marcus began, sharing his screen to display the profiles of 25 exceptional students. Each represents not just individual potential, but the broader impact of expanding opportunity. The seal. Discussion proceeded thoughtfully, with the board approving the selections unanimously. Additional mentorship connections were identified, with several board members volunteering to work directly with students whose interests aligned with their expertise. By the time the meeting concluded, Marcus felt the deep satisfaction that came from creating tangible pathways for others, the kind of opportunities that transformed individual lives while strengthening the entire field through greater diversity of perspective and experience. At 3 o'clock, Tiana arrived at his office, her expression reflecting the triumph of the court victory. The judge specifically cited the documented pattern of incidents as decisive, she reported. "The settlement will affect policy at 5 major airlines, not just Atlantic." "That's the kind of systemic change we hoped for," Marcus acknowledged, "far beyond one incident or one airline." They moved to the office's comfortable seating area, where Marcus had arranged a small celebration, sparkling water and pastries from a local Black-owned bakery that the foundation was supporting through its community business initiative. "I keep thinking about how differently this could have ended," Tiana reflected. "If you hadn't stood your ground that day. If you hadn't spoken up from economy class," Marcus added. "Individual choices matter, even in the face of systemic problems." Their conversation shifted from the court victory to their respective ongoing projects. Tiana had established her own law practice focusing on transportation discrimination cases, already representing several clients with similar experiences. Marcus divided his time between the battery technology implementation and the foundation's expanding work. "My brother wanted me to convey his gratitude again," Tiana mentioned. "The scholarship has completely changed his trajectory. He's already been offered a summer internship at the Renewable Energy Lab. His qualifications earned that opportunity," Marcus emphasized. "We just removed the financial barriers." As evening approached, they moved to the rooftop terrace of the building for dinner. The San Francisco skyline provided a spectacular backdrop as they discussed the future, both the challenges that remained and the progress already achieved. "Do you ever regret the way things unfolded?" Tiana asked, echoing the question Marcus's father had posed earlier. The presentation could have happened without all this additional responsibility. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I believe the technology would have succeeded regardless, But this experience connected the innovation to a larger purpose, reminding me that technical solutions exist within social contexts that also need improvement. He gestured toward the city below. Energy storage batteries can transform how we power communities, but people still need to feel valued and respected within those communities. Both matter. As their dinner concluded, Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. William Parker had announced his retirement as CEO of Atlantic Airways, citing a desire to allow new leadership to fully implement the company's commitment to inclusive service. The incoming CEO would be the first Black woman to lead a major U.S. airline. Another domino falls, Tiana observed. Institutional change happens one decision, one leader, one policy at a time. With occasional pushes from the outside, Marcus added with a smile. The sun set over San Francisco Bay, casting long shadows across the water. In the 3 months since that fateful flight, both justice and innovation had advanced. Not perfectly, not completely, but substantially. The scalding coffee that had ruined Marcus's suit had eventually revealed the character beneath it, while the system that had initially protected discrimination had been forced to confront its failings. 6 months later, Marcus boarded another flight, this time from San Francisco to Tokyo for the groundbreaking ceremony of the first international manufacturing facility for his battery technology. As he settled into his first-class seat, he noticed the flight attendant approaching, a young Black woman whose professional demeanor was matched by her genuine smile. "Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson," she greeted him. "Can I offer you something to drink before takeoff?" "Coffee, please," he replied with a slight smile. "Black with 1 sugar." "Of course," she nodded, returning promptly with his perfectly prepared beverage, complete with a proper napkin and respectful service. As the plane taxied for takeoff, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The technology he had developed would help power communities around the world with clean, reliable energy. The foundation he had established would continue creating opportunities for underrepresented students. And the changes in airline practices, while still imperfect, had begun shifting an industry toward greater accountability and equal treatment. One spilled coffee had created ripples that continued expanding outward, touching lives Marcus would never meet, but who would benefit nonetheless from that moment of standing firm against injustice while pursuing innovation that served humanity. The plane lifted into the sky, carrying him toward new challenges and opportunities. Below, America continued its own complex journey toward fulfilling its promises of equality and dignity for all. Progress came unevenly, with setbacks and resistance, but also with moments of breakthrough and transformation. For Marcus Johnson, the son of a pioneering CEO who had opened doors for others throughout his career, the lesson was clear. True leadership meant using one's position to advance both technological and social progress, recognizing that dignity and innovation were not competing priorities, but complementary forces in creating a more just and sustainable world. What do you think about how Marcus handled this situation? Would you have had the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it meant potentially sacrificing professional opportunities? Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on facing discrimination or standing up for others. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and justice, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, one person standing firm can create ripples of change that transform entire systems. This powerful narrative illustrates how racism persists even in spaces of privilege and achievement. Marcus Johnson's experience reveals that no amount of education, wealth, or professional success can fully shield Black Americans from discrimination. The story demonstrates the critical importance of documentation, strategic response, and maintaining dignity when facing injustice. It shows how individual courage can catalyze systemic change when one refuses to accept mistreatment as normal. The most profound lesson lies in understanding that fighting for accountability doesn't require sacrificing professional goals. Marcus transformed a moment of humiliation into both personal victory and collective progress by leveraging his position to demand institutional change rather than merely personal compensation. His father's wisdom: some victories aren't measured in dollars or individual success, but in how many doors stay open for those coming after you, encapsulates the responsibility that comes with privilege and the power of strategic advocacy. Ultimately, this story teaches us that true leadership means addressing both technological and social progress, recognizing that innovation and human dignity must advance together for meaningful change. What discriminatory experiences have you witnessed or experienced that went unchallenged? Have you ever had to choose between standing up for what's right and taking the easier path? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might give someone else the courage to speak up. If you believe in the importance of holding institutions accountable for discrimination, hit that like button to show your support for those fighting these battles daily. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming injustice and creating systemic change in America. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their dignity matters and that standing firm against racism, even when difficult, creates ripples that benefit countless others. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, courage isn't about never feeling fear. It's about acting with integrity despite it.